they're coming at you. They are coming at you from everywhere. Big ag, big pharma, big food, bad governments. Right? It doesn't matter if in the UK, in Australia, in the US.
Sin, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, first of all, that's the center square of my Dave Mac bingo game. So we've ticked that one off, and I'll give the second one, which is I'm heading down the rabbit hole. It actually, if I could, I'll just kind of back up, but I will set the scene so that if anybody's watching this and wondering what the heck's going on with my accent. So I was born and raised in the US on the West Coast, and then I immigrated to Australia in the late 80s and spent the remaining time kind of between Australia. I had 7 years in Singapore. My husband and I had 6 years in Japan. And then we repatriated to the southwest of Western Australia in 2019. So my accent's pretty much all over the shop, depending on who I'm speaking to and what words I'm using. So, yeah. So if I could compartmentalize, I would say that my early history is up till the age of 25. So the first quarter century was American diet. I struggle with the logic of it being a standard American diet strictly because, of course, ultra processed foods and convenience foods and all of that really took off more or less when I'd left. Having said that, the 80s were filled with top ramen or pot noodle kind of thing, a good feature of my not so healthy diet. Having said that, my mother, we didn't have a lot of money. My mother did the best she could, raising two kids, mainly as a single woman. But stuff like Crisco and 1% milk and these kind of things were part of our diet. And it's frightening. I have to say, it's a bit frightening these days. The more that we learn about all this stuff, the more we're kind of thinking, if I had it to do over, what would I do differently? And obviously none of that stuff would play a part. So I had that, that access to dietary choices, soda pops, the like. I went through the Tab generation. So when skinny became really important, I was living on Tab, which was crap. It was really horrible stuff. But anyway, still doing it. And then lived through the 80s kind of thing. I've never had a real issue with my weight. I've always been reasonably lean. I had a problem with my health, especially in my younger years, because I was living in a house full of smokers. And I had those same parents, the ones that got in the car and made you drive around with the windows up, because we weren't too good to not smoke along with them, right? So I was out ill a lot, bronchitis, lots and lots of lung-style illnesses, keeping me out of school in the early years. When I left home, though, around 18, that was when I was able to kind of begin healing. But I was still not necessarily eating well. My nutrition was poor, and a lot of that had to do with just how much I could afford to eat and what was available. So there was a lot more fast food. There was a lot more, lean days where I wouldn't eat anything. I didn't call it fasting back then. I think now I could say, well, I used to fast regularly. But health-wise, it didn't really seem to impact me. And when I came to Australia, things really did kind of turn around from what I chose to eat perspective, when I was able to eat. So it became, a new world for me. And I got married and started, feeding too, and getting into cooking and preparation and the like. And again, not really any real issues with my health. And it kind of fast forward to around 2000, the early 2000s, and I was dealing. I had a father-in-law who was an amazing, amazing man, and he was about 6'5", about, I don't know what he was, about 250 pounds, I think. Big guy, right? Big belly, from the Midwest of New South Wales, former rugby player and the like, but just not there anymore. And I chose him as a little bit of a challenge because my ex-mother-in-law, she's my ex-mother-in-law now, but she had died during that stage. She had always commented that he was always going to be heavy. Like, it wasn't his fault. And so I'd started reading up on people like the stuff written by Jenny Brand Miller, which was the GI stuff when that came out. And while I know that Robert Lustig hates the GI, it nevertheless was a really great starting point for the consideration of carbs and the issues with carbs and the like. And so I had him come down. I'd done all my reading. I'd done all my research that I could, reading lots and lots of books. And I had him come down. And for the first week, I said, listen, you're going to eat whatever I put in front of you and only that. And he was quite impressed because I made it, all these low GI, but it was, vegetables and everything. So it was across the board. And he started feeling really good because he was diabetic. He was on 60 pills a day. He had high blood pressure tablets. He was just on that usual kind of thing. And all of a sudden his blood sugars started stabilizing. So the second week I educated him. I said to him, this is what I'm doing to you. And he liked it because he was still being able to have a glass of wine in the evening with his meal, which he thought was cool. And he kept it going. But then we got this phone call from the hospital because he had fallen over. And we went to see him. And I said, what's happening? He goes, I got really dizzy and, I took a stumble. Well, it turns out that he hadn't spoken to his doctor. He'd spoken to his doctor, but his doctor hadn't noticed that he'd dropped like 50 kilos. So he was still medicating for this huge man when he had gotten down to, whatever, 180 or something in pounds. And yeah, it was, well, no, it had been higher than that. But anyway, it was just, the doctor hadn't even noticed. And so we said, well, you've got to tell him. You've got to tell him that, And so they pulled all those medications back. And so for me, that was this momentary win. That was this, and he lived, another 10 years and quite healthy and had kept the weight off and that. So that for me, that was this little trigger to do more kind of study from nutrition angles. So when we talk about finding carnivore, it really for me has kind of started with this investigation into nutrition. But it got quiet. And so life took over. I was in Singapore. I was literally on planes constantly. 2 years in a row, I spent more time in hotel beds than I did in my apartment. And then I met my current husband, and we jetted off to Japan for his job. And that was when really I started, I was going through menopause, and I was putting on a few pounds. I was deliriously happy. And I was feeding too. And we were eating so well, I thought. We were eating, like junk food and all that kind of stuff, and ultra processed I had cut out for the most part. I'll come back to that. But we were just, you embrace it. You live in Japan, you know what it's like. I mean, if you're embracing the traditional foods, it's really easy to eat a lot, and it's easy to enjoy it, and it's just Moorish in that way. But so I started becoming a bit of a sausage shape, not really noticing it, but because I had stopped doing quite as much traveling, and I was feeding too, and I was eating, I had lovely lunches out while my husband was at work and that. But I just started kind of bulking up, but not feeling good as well. And then a real clincher came in 2018, and you'll know about this, is that our building was getting a refurb. So they wrap it in plastic, essentially. Now, we had a really, a nice apartment, but it had one window, sliding glass door, balcony. And that was the only kind of outside access. And so they wrapped us up, and they started using chemicals to remove all of the existing tiles and, flooring and all that kind of stuff. And I started feeling, I didn't equate, I didn't tie it together, but I started feeling really anxious. And that's just not something that is kind of part of my way of being. And I was getting catastrophic thinking experience episodes where if I had a slight pain in a rib, or in a slight pain in your gut, which is probably because you went and lifted something really heavy 2 days before, my brain would say, I've got cancer, or I'm going to die, or what am I going to do? And that really disturbed me. It was as if it was an out of body kind of experience. And when I reflect on it, I mean, I was being bombarded by chemicals. I was spending way too much time indoors. I was probably very low in vitamin D. And in fact, I did find that when I would go out, I'd force myself to go out and get on the train and go out of town. We were living in Nagoya, and get out of town and kind of walk through the forest. As you know, again, there's always forests to walk through. I would feel much better fairly quickly. But then coming back in, it was really bad. So in February 2019, I went ahead and went to an English speaking Japanese doctor to have a full workup, because I really hadn't spent any time in doctor's offices. I've never been one of those go for an annual thing. And and all the tests. I mean, he was great. I mean, he really was. He just ran me through all the tests. And the only thing that was slightly high was I had a slightly high LDL. I was extremely happy that my liver function was very good, because I do like my sake. And so I can say that, it was okay. Um, and I started getting worried, because he said not to worry. And he wasn't fussed about it. He wasn't fussed about the LDL. I mean, it was marked at high on the labs notices and things. And I started reading about statins, because then I started freaking out. Oh my God, am I going to have to go on a statin? And then I really started reading about statins. And I was coming to the conclusion very, very quickly that there was no way that I would acquiesce and be put on this drug. And for me, in my head, it was a slippery slope, right? First, you start with the statin. Then you start with the things to deal with and 14 pills later. So he just said to me, walk more, walk more. And so I did. And then it had been about 6 months of the wrapping. So they'd taken it off in December 2018. And over the next, so I went to see the doctor like 2-3 months later. But over the next 6 months, things started calming down, and I got my head back. And we were looking for property and deciding where we were going to live. And so, we found this place where we are now in Australia. And then October 2019, we were here. And again, everything was fine. And then all of a sudden it came back. Right. A little bit of that anxiety. I started having that, catastrophic thinking and worrying and this. And I didn't put it down to our diet, because of course we were eating good things. However, I guess, and I love cooking. And so I love creating things. And COVID didn't impact us in a real way, because we were already here. We were sequestered. There's plenty to do on a farm. And so I was cooking up a storm, still a little sausage. And then I was watching some stuff by Michael Mosley, and the whole logic of, introduction of fasting and the Walter Longo stuff. But this brain stuff started coming. So I went to the GP here in the village, which is great because she's fabulous. And she did the full blood work again and again, high LDL. But my thyroid now was starting to look a bit funny. So my TSH, which is the beginning of the chain that they test for, was elevated, but my T4 was okay. And it was through Ken Berry's Common Sense Labs that I said, okay, right, we're going to do a full panel. And that's when I discovered that my vitamin D levels were really low again, which is understandable. People say, oh, you can get it from sunlight and that. But it's like in Australia, you don't go out in the sun. It's the rule, because it's going to kill you. You're going to get skin cancer if you go in the sun. So she and I had a talk, and I said, okay. And now I also found out that my thyroid antibodies, because she tested the full panel versus the 6 months or so before, and they were really elevated. So my TPO was something like 280 or something, and then my TG was over 1,000. I loved that, over 1,000. So it's like, I don't know if it's 2,000, 10,000, 20,000, but it's over 1,000. And so now I'm, Googling and YouTubing and, Hashimoto's and thyroid and all that kind of stuff. And that's when things started leaning into plants, toxins, issues with autoimmune function. I watched a video with Mark Hyman and one of the doctors, Papanopoulos or something, and he was fabulous. And he talked about, I loved this. He said, we got to think of Hashimoto's not as a thyroid issue, but as an autoimmune issue that happens to be targeting the thyroid. So then you start to think, okay, well, why is my immune system being triggered to this degree? And again, then the vitamin D levels were really, really low. And the work that John Campbell has done to try and bring the detail out about low vitamin D levels around the time of a particularly tough illness in the world, that was a huge issue. So I started, mainlining vitamin D3 and K2 and brought my levels up. But unfortunately, on the last, well, not unfortunately, but even better the devil you know, on March 1st, I had my last blood work after a full month on full carnivore and strict carnivore and no alcohol, and just took everything out. It was still, my antibodies are still a bit high, or even a little bit higher. But the vitamin D was up now to, a really good, almost where I want it. Right. And so the catastrophic thinking though disappeared as well. And hydrating became an issue because I've always been a bit of a camel, don't need to drink water. But once I started ensuring that I was drinking 2 liters a day, all of the niggly pains that would trigger the catastrophic thinking disappeared. So, it's that the cool thing about what you do and what particularly the individuals that you bring on and allow this space is we're all hearing little moments of, oh, hey, that's me. Or, no, I didn't really do that, but maybe that's associated with. And then we go out, once we hang up the phone kind of thing, we go out and have a look to say, can I find out more about that? And starting to pull, things together. And all the major people. So now, and I'm kind of a badge of honor that I didn't come into carnivore through Jordan Peterson or Michaela Peterson. I watched it about 2 weeks ago. I finally said, okay, because Joe Rogan used to be on a TV show called News Radio. I loved him in that, but that's how I kind of see him, is he's an actor. Right? But everybody kept saying this, Jordan Peterson. So I Googled and got a hold of that and watched it. I thought, okay, interesting. But yeah, so it's been a long, convoluted kind of journey, I think, as it is for many people. But one thing I haven't mentioned yet was when I first went into the Michael Mosley stuff and the idea of the fasting and the time restricted eating and that, I made a decision when was it? I think it was, wrote it down here. Come on. about 2023, early 2023, maybe mid 2022, to do the kind of 18-6, giving my body time to digest, giving my body time to heal, get onto other things rather than digesting food. And my menopause pounds disappeared. They just disappeared. So for me, it wasn't so much going carnivore that brought the weight loss, and it wasn't even at the time. I wasn't trying to. That was what was kind of cool about it. It was more that logic of allow my body time to do its healing exercises versus worrying about restricting my calorie intake or managing that. And the weight just shed. And so and shape wise, so all of a sudden, I'm back to an hourglass figure. I'm back to a size 10, which is I think about a size 4, size 2 in American, which your clothes don't lie, and feeling strong in that. But that's just gone that next level since I've focused on meat only, and in particular, big breaking fasts at around 10:30, 11 in the morning. I will, couple of eggs, which I know people say 8 eggs or something. I say, no, I can do a couple of eggs because I don't have a big appetite, but I have a couple of eggs, a couple of homemade beef patties, which I make with extra fat. That I feel like, I could do that once a day, but I know I'm not getting enough nutrition likely in that.
That 18-6, in those 6 hours, you're eating how many times?
I'll be eating twice. So
Okay.
my husband and I were not really sharing the first meal of the day. So he would generally eat a bit earlier, and he would have, still will. Now we're kind of, because I've expanded my window, now we're kind of both on about 10:30. And some days he'll do, my homemade sourdough with a tin of sardines. He normally has a tin of sardines every day, a couple of eggs, and then he might put peanut butter or Marmite on, a slice of bread as well. Or I'll cook for both, and we'll do bacon and eggs and sausages. Yesterday we did bison chorizo kind of thing. So we can get a lot of really kind of cool meats down here. And then doing our afternoon meal at around 5 o'clock or so. And actually that ties it back. That was another thing I didn't mention. In Japan, when we were living there, what was happening is because he would come home at 6 p.m. and 6:15, and then I'd have a full meal kind of waiting for us. And so we would both eat. And then we're both early to bed people generally. So by about 9 o'clock, 9:30 maximum, we're in bed. So there really wasn't, I discovered, I started experiencing GERD, heartburn, and there would be nothing for it, to get up and kind of clear the decks, which is not something you want to do. But then I could sleep. And it makes perfect sense. You're eating this, substantial meal. You're sitting down, you're having a glass of wine, then you're laying horizontal. And so, well, of course. And thus, I also then, in doing that, because I had this acid reflux that took the form it took, I ended up developing what they call a Schatzki's ring, which is in the lower end of your esophagus, is basically a bit of scar tissue that is built up because of the acid side of things. And it's also known as steakhouse syndrome, which is not good for a carnivore, right? You don't want to know, okay, I think I'll go carnivore now and kill myself. What happens is when you eat, if you don't really chew your food well, and sometimes even if you do, but you'll get a bolus of food that won't want to go down, right? So you're not choking or anything. It's just sitting there saying, yeah, I'm fine here for a while. And so then you're, trying to force it down with gulps of water, which means you're, drinking a ton of water while you're eating, which is, again, not very good. So when I lost the weight and we started eating earlier in the day, it basically all went away. So I haven't had any form of heartburn, GERD, whatever you want to call it, in yonks. And indeed, I'm just finding that even there is some healing from the Shotsky ring as well. So I follow another person on YouTube quite religiously, which is a channel called Pottinger's Human. And he's a very clever bloke. And, you know, he's kind of like a really, really, really nice Bart K, right? So not quite so, you know, vehement about things, but he will go into science, and and you know, he kind of goes places where Stennickberg and Eric Berg and these kind of guys don't yet go. So, you know, learning, he's very much into fasting, the fasting side of it, and the physiology of fasting and what happens in that. So I think there's, you know, bringing these things together, what you're putting in your diet, you know, putting in your mouth between whatever your time window is vital. Getting out the ultra processed foods is absolutely imperative. And yeah, so we're seeing that healing. Recently, it's only been about a year now, though, that I really got it about seed oils. We actually have olives, so we have a grove of olive trees, and we create our own extra virgin olive oil. But, you know, every now and again, you want to fry up something, or, you know, doing that. And I was using seed oil still up until about a year and a bit ago. And I'm really pleased I've pulled them out now. And I think that's where the insidious side of the ultra processed, you know, foods are. I mean, we can, you know, I don't go down the certain aisles. I haven't done for 25 years, 35 years. Go down certain aisles in the supermarket. I don't buy, you know, these things. However, sauces, you know, if you buy a bag of frozen and ready to cook chips, it's canola oil, you know. So that took me a while to kind of get my head around and pull completely out, but then it's all gone now. So there's, you know, I make my own sauce, you know, sauce. I make my own tomato sauce, even if we need to have that. But yeah, it's an interesting world we're living in, and it's that most of it's trying to kill us.
Yeah. Well, speaking of on the seed oils point, you know, when you mentioned it being insidious, like in Japan, you go down the aisle where all the seed oils are, and like they've got brands of canola oil, and it's wrapped in like labels that say Hiroshi oil, or like healthy oil. And you know,
Yep,
most people don't know any difference. They're going, "Oh, I'm going to get the healthy one,"
yep, and
you
that,
know.
you know, it's that's the kind of stuff that gets me screaming at the at my iPad when I'm watching, is or the television, right? It's we've started a series of ads here in Australia that are starting to call out ordering takeaway too often is not good for you, right? And it increases your chances of X cancer, Y cancer, and all that, because the other side of most of the commercials in Australia, they're kind of two discrete logics here. One is everybody's getting cancer, so it's all about cancer, cancer, cancer. Have you had your DEXA scan? Have you done this? Bowel cancer's on the rise, breast cancer's on the rise, and it can, you know, build anxiety if you're somebody who's worried about health. You know, if you're going through a catastrophic thinking, health, anxiety, you know, time, watching this stuff is just messing with your brain. So I start calling it out, bullshit, kind of thing. But or, you know, they're about life insurance. Everything's about life insurance. But the other one is, you know, everything causes cancer. But then, of course, all the junk food ads, right? And the and all the packaging, you know, healthy. And I think I was reading, so I'm just about to finish up the plant-based con, which is just phenomenal. And I actually, all this started, funnily enough, with this book, which is called Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills. So it's all about aspartame, you know, fake sugars and the like. Back in 1997, However, it's that um, you start to read the plant-based content. You read Nina Teicholz's work. You read Gary Taubes's books. I read, the Obesity Code, the Diabetes Code, the Cancer Code by Jason Fung. You start to read all this stuff and you get angry. If you read, you really want to get angry. Read, and I know you've had him on. Oh, he's so funny, Malcolm Kendrick. Oh, he's such a character. He's such a delight. And if you buy his book and read it, you'll read it with his voice in your ear. It's just
It
fantastic. You can
really
hear
comes
him.
across in his writing, right?
Oh, he does. He's taken the Mickey the whole time, but it makes you angry. I mean, you kind of because, and then what was the other one? Chris Van Tulleken's Ultra Processed People. I read that recently, and they're coming at you. They are coming at you from everywhere. Big ag, big pharma, big food, bad governments. Right? It doesn't matter if in the UK, in Australia, in the US. I think the thing that we have going for us outside of the US is that pharmaceutical advertising is not allowed. My husband and I were in the US in 2016, and we were just gobsmacked. You turn on the television, it's like, are you experiencing this? Ask your doctor about this. And then 45 seconds of may cause anal leakage. Yeah, and of all these stuff. And so these people are walking in saying, oh, doctor, it hurts when I do this. And instead of the doctor saying, well, don't do that, the doctor says, I got a pill for that. Yeah. Sorry, I'm showing
That,
my age.
that's
Some of my
that
jokes.
that that's awesome. Well, don't do
Yeah.
this. Yeah. So, um, like on your journey, a lot of it has been fasting and also working out, kind of things like glycemic index of foods and stuff early on, and the
Mm.
way through that. But as far as Carnivore goes, I mean, that's been about a month full time for you.
Uh, so I started, February
February.
this year. I went,
Mhm.
I committed to really doing hardcore carnivore. The odd piece of broccoli, you know, gets on my plate every now and again. I do. My husband's coming along, but he just, because neither of us are feeling bad, so there's no urgency. However, we're feeling so much better, and I think that's an interesting one. I know, the reason why I reached out to you is, for your calls for people, is kind of saying, hey, listen, if you don't have all these, existing conditions, it's still okay to come and talk to us. And I do have existing conditions, and I'm sure that there are all sorts of things going on in my body. I think that it's been that discovery that these tweaks and this leaning in, actually, I could have felt a lot better. So not only dealing with, the health anxiety and the catastrophic thinking, um, but also just daily, waking up, and we've always been easy to wake up, but it's on another level. you know if you wake up in the middle of the night, it's usually because you're kind of feeling like, well, I've had enough to sleep. I might read a bit or whatever. You're not waking up going, oh god, I'm not going to be good tomorrow or whatever. I think that you start to really shift into that more primal kind of side of things. So yeah, I mean, the carnivore logic to me is so vital as an elimination experience. And since getting my most recent bloods where my antibodies are still high, the next thing I've ensured I've taken out really religiously was wheat. I didn't eat a lot of bread, and I make all my own stuff anyway. Hopefully, getting well sourced grain. However, I just took it all out. So that means no, nothing in there, and that's where carnivore really is helpful, because you're not trying to substitute, for things that you just no steak, butter, eggs, fish, loads of fish. We love fish, pork, and all that. So again, animal focused, animal forward, and It means I'm not able to do all the fun cooking things that I was doing for a while, 48 ways with leftovers. However, you know, your health's more important.
So, and I mean, on top of that, it's probably given you back a lot of time, no?
Yeah. And we're semi-retired anyway. I mean, I'm still doing my work, but I still, it's, sporadic, and I might not work for, 3 or 4 weeks. So, I've got from, 7 in the morning until 9:30, 10 at night to fill my day. And because we're on acreage and things, there's plenty of stuff that needs to be done. There's always something to be done on a farm. However, that removing that, what am I going to cook for dinner? And I would start cooking at 8 or 9 in the morning, because I would make all the base sauces. I was the queen of mise en place, and I would, cut everything up and prepare for whatever I was making. And I enjoyed it. And, my Facebook feed is, absolutely full of my, food creations, really more to let my family know I'm eating okay. Um, but yeah, it's a lot less than that. I'm not, flooding my feed with photos of magic things. Now, you can only put bacon and eggs up so many times, then people start to get a bit bored. Like, oh yeah, eggs and bacon. No, today it was bacon and eggs. Not a lot of variety there. Not a lot of variety.
You
So
ever
yeah,
watch
we feel better. We have more time. Yeah,
Yeah. You ever watch Monty Python?
but I don't. I'm not.
Just
I'm not to that level where you memorize everything. Except
it
nobody expects that. Yeah, Spanish
just reminds
Inquisition.
me of the spam sketch on Monty Python, the spam with everything, and it's like, well, what if you don't like spam? And it's like, well, you can get it with just a little bit of spam. It's it makes me, when you talk about your Facebook feed, that's what it reminds me of.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
one thing that I wanted to emphasize that you said was how you you were feeling good, but you didn't know how much better you could feel until you
mm,
did this. And I think that's important for people to like really listen to, because um we just go about life thinking the way we feel is, well, that's the best it's ever going to get. And when we start to feel a bit more joint pain or a bit more of this problem or that problem, is like, okay, well, I'm now at the top level I'm ever going to get to, unless I can get some drugs for this.
yeah,
And switching to carnivore is like, it's just another level, because it's just like, I felt okay, but this feels so much better.
yeah. Well, you kind of signpost yourself. So you must get together, and you get together with people, and it's to talk about the weather, or you get together with people, and it's let's talk about our aches and pains. And I and all because it's all part of aging. And I don't deny the fact that I'm aging. I'm 61 years old, and I know I'm going to be 62 this year. I mean, I'm not, putting my head in the sand. What I am pushing back on, based on everything I learned from your people, right, and the others that are out there, because love or hate it, YouTube provides a platform. So, stuff that was never going to get out otherwise is out. That the barn door is open, the horses are out, which is brilliant. And all of a sudden we're all starting to, well, hopefully more of us are starting to challenge that. Well, 61, you're lucky you're not on six, pills by now, but that ache and pain. And I have noticed, like I had built up just it was back when we were still in Japan. So I built up like a small nodule on my hands, and it's like, okay, what is that? Am I dying? And somebody said, oh well, now you've obviously got a little bit of arthritis that's forming, kind of thing. Those are that's those symptoms, and that. And if I were 20, somebody would probably say, wow, that's early on, that's not good. But because I'm 60, like, yeah, that's what you get. but it's gone. And in fact, I had built up, it had moved from here to here, and this one's almost completely gone as well. And that's the time. That's the time on carnivore. And that was one of the things I've been thinking as I've been watching a lot of your videos, is a lot of folks will say that the moment you got to go on to it and commit to it, that you see such results so quickly, and you do. And you also, I think, benefit from recognizing that some things are going to take longer, right? So, and sometimes you feel really, really good, and then if you're somebody coming off of a huge ultra processed load, then you are more likely, and high carb ultra processed in particular. Let's throw all that together. That's just a recipe for death. Then you're going to go through keto flu, and you're likely to feel worse before you then kind of come back up, and giving your body time to do what it needs to do to actually heal, because not everything heals in the same timeline. So I think there's that great appreciation for, it's not you're great and then you're great forever. And you see that, I think, in even people like Kelly Hogan, right? So when she's sharing her journey, and she's really the leanest I think she's ever been, per her own kind of statements, and yet she's talked with a lot of different people, and so she's shaking up her, still carnivore, absolutely, but she's shaking up when she's eating, how much, and that kind of thing. And that's the stuff that's still out. The jury's still out with me. Is, am I eating enough to get the right nutrition? Because I can say I'm eating the proper human diet, but I can't sit down and eat 500 grams of ribeye, right? And eat eggs in a nomad situation. I just, it won't go in me. I mean, I can eat till I'm satiated, and like so many people before me on this stage have said, it's a different full. It's not the same full. It's not the lean back after Thanksgiving dinner, undo your pants, and think about whether or not you're going to be able to beat your uncle into the, whenever it happens. It's not that feeling of bloatedness and I couldn't eat another bite. Oh, cake. It's not that feeling. It's just, I'm done. And so my worry, or my kind of current concern is, do I trust my body's signals to know? Because I've often thought cravings are your body's asking for nutrients, a particular nutrient. So pregnant women, would often crave dirt, which sounds really weird. However, it was the minerals in the dirt that their body was demanding. And so is a craving, when it's outside of the UPF messed up type, manipulated. But if you're in carnivore, if you have a crave, if you have a craving, are you craving a particular vitamin or mineral, or that type of thing? So, that is the area that I'm still at odds with. And I think for all of us that we're coming into this, starting with carnivore is so helpful to just set a baseline, right? Turn off the people that say vitamin C, scurvy. Turn off all of that. Say, if your body isn't craving anything, again, once you've gotten past the ultra processed, withdrawals, if your body's not asking you for anything, then is it getting, do we just say, well, then it's getting enough? So that's kind of the area that I'm still, leaning into learning.
Mm. Yeah. And I can understand that. I've kind of, I've felt a little bit at the start, because I did OMAD for a long time, and I still do OMAD mostly. But yeah, earlier on, if I did get a twinge of a feeling like I should eat something later on in the day, I
Mm.
was always like, oh, hang on, the cravings are coming back. It's and knowing myself, and I'm feeling like, okay, it's just a matter of time before I'm lying under a box of donuts or something. Um, but yeah, over time, I found that I think what's happening is my body, when it does want some proper nutrition, as you say, it does go, hey, you feel like eating something, and I'll
Mm,
gravitate towards making some extra ground beef for the day or something like that. But
yeah.
for me, the biggest issue with this kind of thing was making sure that it wasn't kind of a craving for something that I shouldn't be eating, like an ultra processed food. But
Mm.
so it took me a while to get comfortable that my body was not signaling for that.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Mm.
can imagine that I was very fortunate to kind of remove the UPF for the majority out of my world fairly early on. So the quality of the foods I was eating was not really of a concern. And again, with this insidious, look at the label on a jar of mayonnaise kind of thing. It's but outside of that, the quality of the food that we were eating was actually reasonably high. But I say that, but when you can walk into a green grocer and get stuff out of season, and that's where I kind of draw the line. And I'm not too freaked out about plant toxins because I've never been vegetarian. I've never loaded myself with vegetables, right? But, I kept questioning the whole UK logic of 5 a day. I was like, five what? 5 apples? What is a serving? 5 a day, and I don't believe that we need the vegetables and everything as part of our nutritional profile. And so if we choose to have some cruciferous vegetables on the side, or I make our I don't make kimchi. I've tried it. I'm not good at it, but we buy kimchi from a reputable, source, and then I make sauerkraut and that. And so I will try and put, add a ferment in and that, because I just like it, kind of thing, more than anything. But not necessarily because I think my microbiome will get bored otherwise. And yeah, so but and we're still, even though we're progressing, I think, with knowledge and appreciation for physiology in the real sense, and how the human biology truly works, the system and all that, we're still confusing things. We're still confusing people because it is still a scientific sounding, new thing that then we have to have people debunk, or so there's still a lot of, even though we're moving away from the pyramid as it stands. We're now moving into a different logic, but we're still getting a lot of, you know, garbage and noise in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the world. So, but I think that's where you just go, how do you feel, right? How do you feel?
Mm,
And
yeah. How would you recommend someone get started based on the experience you've had with carnivore?
yeah, I think if someone asks, so the first thing is wait till someone asks. So my kind of mantra there is always inspire, don't instruct. And But I would say, first and foremost, because this is where I do believe the biggest issue is cut out the crap. And by crap, I mean ultra processed. Anything ultra processed and seed oils, put those two in a bin, clear that stuff out. And respect that you're going to go through some withdrawals. Then look at the additional sugars that you've got in your diet from a comprehensive way. So, not just, are you making muffins, saying, well, I made them from scratch, they're okay. They may be, I was raised with, homemade muffins and things like that. And at the time, it didn't cause me any dramas whatsoever. And so I don't think that we have to go too crazy on that. However, when you're wanting to go carnivore, start there, and then ease into it. I know we've got kind of both camps, that it's so fun to watch people saying, I went full on in, saying, yeah, good. You have to choose, but first and foremost, cut out the crap. Then look at the meal, and know that when you come into the carnivore world, it's going to seem more expensive, yet it really, in my experience, it isn't. And in fact, it probably saves you money. And if you look at your world holistically, if you're off of these drugs that you're co-paying on, if you're able to do more and move more, and you're feeling less like you have to do XYZ and take these pills and do whatever, there's a significant cost saving there. But then when you get into carnivore, it's just, yeah, taking every day, maybe take a diary. I would recommend doing a bit of a diary, because if you can get it out of here and you're thinking about it, just every day, just say, the date, and on a scale of, 1 to 10, how are you feeling? Anything to report, but nothing, you don't have to make it a tome. You don't need to, it's Tuesday, it's sun is shining. It's not that kind of, a diary. Rather, just kind of keep track. If you are expecting to lose some weight and hoping to lose some weight, then, go buy your clothes. How are your clothes fitting? And, when that's, really valuable. And when you start to see that, your belts are, loosening, and you're changing shape, then that's just keep going. Know that you'll eat less. And that's what I would, kind of recommend. Interestingly, there's, no one around me is asked. So, my husband just eats what I put in front of him. So he's an easy target. And he's fit, and he's lost kilos himself right around his belly. I mean, we both still enjoy beverages. And none of that fruit juice stuff, haven't touched that in years, but the fermented fruit juice is really still quite nice. So we've chosen to kind of continue that side of things. It doesn't seem to be being an issue, but I think it's a case of when you've taken all the other stuff that can kill you, and is desperately trying to mess with you, the emulsifiers, all that kind of stuff, then, the glass or two of wine in the day is not a big drama. But, so that's what, I kind of recommend. I also, there's just something that's kind of a bit of a bugbear with me, but it's more a case of being generous to yourself. Is I hear people talk about when they have cheat meals, or they were cheating, or they fell off the wagon. And as a coach, what I would be encouraging is for folks to remove that type of language from that moment, right? If you, and my husband and I, we'll be heading up to the bigger city tomorrow, Friday, and we go to the pub and we eat what we want, and it's a nice pub. It makes nice meals, but there's seed oils in it, right? There's probably more veggie there. This is there, and we're going to have a craft beer kind of thing. But I just refuse to use language like, oh, I had a cheat day, or I fell off the wagon kind of thing, because I think that when you start to do that, it plays into a psychology and a relationship with food that is a negative one. So instead, and it can lead you to say, well, I've already cheated, so I may as well eat the entire box of donuts. Right?
Yeah, it's almost a language of, I haven't thought about it like this before, but it's almost a language of helplessness, maybe.
Victim, you're playing you're keeping yourself in the victimhood. You've spoken about, and I love your video. Oh, I couldn't do that in Japanese, and it's that element of, we have a saying we use, which is, if you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them, right? So most people hold themselves back all on their own. It's like, oh, I couldn't do that. Oh, I can't do that. Well, if you say so, you're absolutely right. If you say you can't do it, you're absolutely right. And so, a lot of the kind of, if we're going to make a big change to something, and you need to be mindful of the antisocial side of it, or differently social. Let's use that differently social side of it. Are the people that you surround yourself that are saying, ooh, Are you sure you don't want some of this? Right? I can give you a small bowl. I can do this. And I think, thank you, no. I don't know what part of no did not make sense there, but I could try saying it a different way. That you have to be prepared for that. And I always say, prepared is armed. So when people, somebody's going to say, I'm worried about you, or I'm concerned that you're not getting this, and say, thank you for your concern. Thank you for that's it. Thank you for your concern.
Yeah.
And then, so
Mm.
it is
Yeah.
that kind of side. So now I feel as well, and I think a few of your guests have highlighted this as well, especially when you ask them about, their family members or people around them. One of the kind of things that was playing in my head as far as my kind of health anxiety and being fed by this stream, note to self, don't watch television in the daytime. Oh, I don't like the commercials in the daytime. There's a fix for that. So, is saying, if, not when, but if my husband or I experienced we would call it a cancer or whatever, I feel now like I have so much more knowledge, and, you're not going to be thinking clearly if that happens. That's not the time to learn. But for a lot of people, it's when they learn, is when they're faced with this kind of thing. I just feel now, with all of the generous, sharing that clinicians and scientists and, David Harper up in Canada, Chris Palmer and Georgia Eads on the psychology front of all of this, and the Robert Lustigs and the Ken Berrys and the Sean Bakers and, name. That all of these individuals have as an individual, given me a gift of, to a degree, being prepared, being willing to, being empowered, that if I'm sitting in front of an oncologist, and I have a neighbor that's an oncological nurse, and she talks about how they have two oncologists, and one of them, the patient will say, should I, look at what I'm eating, or, during all of this? And the doctor, no, it doesn't matter. The other one, the one you want to get, is the one who says, well, as a matter of fact, right? Let's put you on a ketogenic experience, that, in association with the standard of care, right? This should help you even more. And so I think, being able to have this information and being able to question confidently has also brought my, again, health anxiety down quite significantly, because not only am I physiologically addressing it through my diet and making sure that everything's running, greasy wheels and oily wheels up there, but I feel more empowered with the knowledge, right? So I know psychologically, physiologically, intellectually.
Nice. So Sin, if people want to get in contact with you, how can they reach out?
Yes, so I recently created an Instagram account. So I've moved all those photos of food over to my Instagram account. Well, the current ones. So there's a lot of photos of bacon and eggs and bacon and steaks and butter. Right? So, that's probably me done. I think I've done 20 posts. That's probably my whole repertoire is now up on at The Answer Is Meat on Insta. Uh, People will see me on Facebook in the comments, usually on your videos, as Knack Farmer, Knack Farmer. And yeah, I don't know. I would question the additional value that myself versus all of your other people, could give anyone, because it is so clear that folks have been spending time in the rabbit warren, right, with all of our friends. We're all down here. We're all looking around. We're all, tucking into different holes, kind of thing. And I think everybody has so much to give. And so the people that have begun, their own YouTube channels. I do have a YouTube channel, which is, again, Knack Farmer. all I've done is put up a couple of static videos, which are essentially look at the description because it lists all the people I've been, reading on. And then I also created a couple of playlists, which are all of the documentaries, Fat Two, anything where it's essentially kind of good journalism where they're exposing the lies that big food and big government and everybody else is trying to perpetrate. So there's definitely ways for people to get in touch with me.
Yeah, I'll link to those below. And look, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And yeah, it's nice to hear someone say "yonks" in the middle of a conversation. I haven't heard that. I have. I haven't heard that for yonks.
Yeah, it does pop in every now and again, and I always know when I'm speaking to somebody that I'm speaking Australian, and they're speaking American. And I had a young boy that recently asked me, goes, "Can you speak American?" I said, "Well, it depends on what you mean by American, darling." But it was just he thought that American and Australian were two different languages, and he's not far off. So I can always know when I'm speaking to a friend in the US that I've obviously dipped into Australian because they get this kind of momentary look that says, "I'm not really certain what you said there."